Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on weird and true mysterious stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Would you like even more content? Here's my Patreon. Now onto the stories. This is my channel's weekly compendium, ending Monday, February 20th, 2023. Case file number 979, written by Sagittarian Pocky. Both of us heard a blast that never happened. A few months back, my boyfriend and I were laying down, about to go to sleep. It was extremely quiet, and all of a sudden we saw a bright flash of white light and heard a loud boom that originated inside the room. We both jumped up and turned on a light. We were positive it came from the exact center of the bedroom, but the center of the room was completely empty. There was nothing there, no table, no items, no lights, nothing. The furniture's against the walls. The room doesn't have a window either. The light came from inside the room, even though no lights were on to begin with. To this day, we still try to theorize what it was. Did a water bottle pop back into shape? No, we drink water from glass cups. Did the cat do something? No, he didn't have a cat when this happened. Was it a thunderstorm? No, the weather was clear. Was it a power outage? Nope, power was on, obviously. We turned on a light. Was it a phone? No, they were under the blankets. It never happened again, but it still weirds us out. Where did it come from? What was it? Case file number 980, written by Morning 6039. Someone helped my doppelganger. I still recall this incident frequently and wonder what the hell happened that day. I'd gone bowling with my cousin, and right when we were about to leave, I heard a voice calling my name, and we both turned around and saw two boys. One of them was calling my name and looking right at me. He was a complete stranger, and we approached him because I was shocked that he knew me while I had never seen his face. At first, I thought he was an old classmate of mine from primary school, and he had probably changed so much that I couldn't recognize him. I asked him who he was, and he seemed baffled that I didn't remember him. He told me, "Don't you remember me? I'm," his name, "who helped you put your suitcase in the car last week." I asked him where that had happened, and he named one of the towns around the one I live in. I was so confused because this had never happened, and I told him he must be thinking of someone else. He said, "Aren't you my name?" And I said, "Yeah, but I've never seen you before." He replied, "You look exactly like her." I never forgot about that day. I still wonder who that girl was and how it's possible that she had my name and looked exactly like me, and apparently lives near me too. Case file number 981, written by Bearbell X. My cousin paid us a visit, but it wasn't her. Hello, this is a story that still haunts me to this day. What I want to tell you about happened like half a year ago. It's about me, female 20, my cousin, female 36, and my grandma, female 66, if any of this matters. I grew up with my grandma, and my cousin is actually the second closest person I have in my life since day one. She lives a few towns away, but she comes over to visit me and my grandma at least once a month. Since I can remember, it has never been any different than that, and when she would come over, she would always text or call me first, asking to get a coffee ready. When I was a child, she called my grandma first. She would never come without informing us before. As soon as she's at our door, it's always the same, like a little ritual. I open the door, she hugs me, puts her bag down and takes her jacket off, and then goes to the living room to hug my grandma. That in mind, let's go a few months back in time. It was a regular day in the afternoon when our doorbell rang. I didn't really know who it was, but I assumed it was the package delivery driver asking me to take a package from my neighbors or something like that. So I looked out the window. We live on the third floor of the most stereotypical East German looking flat ever. I really have to lean out to see who's there. And I saw that it was my cousin. I was pretty happy to see her, but already surprised that she came over without calling before. I opened the door and let her in, but instead of hugging me, she walked straight past me and sat down in the living room. She didn't put her bag down, because weird enough, she didn't even bring her bag. My grandma had the same reaction as me, happy about the visit, but kind of surprised, but it just got weirder. For like an hour, we just talked about the usual stuff, what's new, how's everyone, etc. At some point in the conversation, we brought up her brother's car, and she acted surprised. She said that he doesn't have a car and that she can't even remember him having a license, which is weird because she helped him get and choose the car not long ago. And she told us about that before when her brother was with her. Even after we told her that, she swore she couldn't remember. By her tone, we knew she wasn't kidding. Overall, she isn't the person who would do stuff like this just to mess with us. After 2 or 3 hours, she said she had to go home because there's work tomorrow. She stood up, walked straight to the door, and left. I looked up out of the window to say goodbye. We always do this, but she didn't even look up. My grandma and I both agreed that this was the strangest visit ever, and that we were going to ask her about it the next time she comes over. Few weeks forward, she called me as usual, saying she would come over, so I got a coffee ready, and when she was at our apartment, everything was the same as always. She came in, hugged me, put the bag down, etc. As soon as she sat down, we agreed to ask her about the last time, and she knew nothing. Like that didn't even happen in her memory. When we asked when she was here the last time, she said a month ago, but that weird visit was like 2 weeks ago. When we asked what we had talked about when she was here last time, she said all the stuff from the time she was here a month ago, not the last time. She thought we were kidding or trying to mess with her, but we were just so confused. She still doesn't remember this day. P.S. None of us were under influence of alcohol or any substances or anything like that. Case file number 982, written by Infinite Cranberry 1, The Interstellar Gas Station. About 3 months ago, I went to pick up Chinese food at a place my husband and I go very often. I paid using my debit card, and then stopped at the same gas station I always do on my way home to throw $20 in the tank. When I went inside, I didn't recognize the clerk, but didn't think about this until later. I only really noticed it was one of the 5 employees I always talked to because of the weird interaction I had. I went to pay with the same debit card, and it declined. Weird. There was not a funding problem. I went to check my phone to see if my bank had texted me about the charge for some reason, only to find that instead of having service, my phone displayed SOS where 5G usually would be. I have never seen that before. Very confused, I tried to use one of my credit cards, issued from a different bank. Declined. Now embarrassed, I found some cash and told the cashier what pump I was on. There was no one else at the gas station, and I walked back to my car, pulled out the pump, and tried to start pumping gas, to no avail. The pump wasn't cleared from the previous transaction. My phone was still saying SOS, and hairs on the back of my neck started sticking up. The street around the gas station, which should have been somewhat busy for a Saturday evening, was completely dead. I was utterly confused and felt disoriented. After pressing all 3 types of gas and the clear button several times, I went back inside and asked the clerk if there was something wrong with the pump. They looked at me as if they'd never seen or spoken to me before and asked which pump I was on. On the second trip, I was able to get it to work, but drove away with the strangest feeling. My phone only started working when I got back to my house, and there has never been any problems with my cell service or bank cards since. I know it seems really mundane, but I can't shake the feeling that I left reality or left this timeline for 30 minutes. Bonus file written by Trust5419, The Man Addicted to Electricity. This was about 20 years ago, in an apartment in San Diego, which was a new build. I lived there with my girlfriend for about a year. Then we broke up, she moved out, and a friend moved in because he needed a place to crash for a few months, and I could use the help on rent. We'll call him Z. I had a fold-out couch Z was staying on, and Z wasn't working. So he would pretty much watch TV all day or play video games while I was at work. In the evenings, we partied too much. Z would always complain that he couldn't sleep and would always find himself awake in the middle of the night, staring up at the corner of the room. I never thought of this, because alcohol and drugs mess with everything, so I was like, whatever, you're going to bed blackout drunk every night. So I had a DVD player with no buttons on it. You had to use a remote to control anything besides turning it on or off. Z bought Lost on DVD, that's how old the story is, and he yelled out, "Hey, I'm gonna start watching this." And I said, "Let me know when it's loaded up and I'll come out." A half hour passed, and I went out to find the place a mess. Long story short, he couldn't find the remote. We then collectively tore the place apart. We spent nearly 2 hours looking everywhere for the remote. Since we drank a lot, we even checked our cars, the dishwasher, and pockets and jeans that were in laundry baskets, literally everywhere. Since Z was staying on a pull-out couch bed, we, of course, took that all apart and it wasn't there. At this point, we felt defeated and agreed to go buy a new DVD player to watch Lost. We put the house back together and were sitting on the couch side by side, and I knew it was a long shot, but I thought I didn't check the freezer, even though we checked the fridge. So I said, hey, let me check one last place. Went to the freezer, not there. I went back to him, and the freaking remote was on the couch exactly where I was sitting when I got up 20 seconds before to go to the freezer. Z was on his laptop right next to it the whole time. I picked it up and said, dude, where did you find it? And he looked at me and turned white. We both ran outside and flipped out for 45 minutes. Over the period of the next few weeks, stuff that carries electrical charges went missing. Electric razor chargers, phone chargers, MP3 player chargers, and laptop cables. Z moved out on a weekday while I was at work. The room he was staying in was empty besides the furniture. When I got home from work, all those cables were in a corner of the room. I know this wasn't him messing with me because later on he made me mail a few to him. So once Z moved out for some reason, I couldn't sleep in my own bed, and I could only sleep on the couch. Almost every night, I would just wake up sitting on the couch, staring at one upper corner of the room, just as he said he did. Where I worked, once a month, I would have to work a late shift. As such, I got home at around 7 a.m., crashed on the couch, and around 10 a.m. I woke up and there was an old man standing in front of me about 4 feet away. I played it off as if I was just tired and dreaming, but I stared at him for about a minute and realized I was awake. He wasn't dressed like an old man either. He was wearing a t-shirt, sneakers with socks that went to his calves, and a baseball cap. After about 3 minutes, he, in an unnatural way, turned to look at me, made eye contact, then took a few steps and disappeared. I flipped the fuck out, and while I planned to move out of there in 2 weeks, I was gone in a few days. I have many more stories like this, but this one carries the most weight, so I wanted to share it while I was on my computer and could type it out. Case file number 983, written by Dull Yesterday 2655, the voicemail from another universe. This occurred about 3 years ago. I had a position as a buyer, and as such, would receive tons of cold calls and emails from people trying to get our company to try their products for resale. Also important, our company had a digital, voice over IP, not sure of the correct terminology, phone system. There was one central number and it followed a phone tree to multiple offices via internet connection. Voicemails were available on our big office phones, but the recording would also be sent to our emails. So one day, I received a voicemail from a phone number I recognized as someone who had been attempting to get a hold of me to sell me their products. Oddly, the voicemail was something like 15 minutes long. Curious, I began to listen to it. The message begins with just static and the sound of rustling. Seems like a classic case of butt dial, or maybe they forgot to hang up when the voicemail clicked. I fast-forwarded the message just to see if anything was ever heard, and yes, suddenly a clear voice. They're having a one-sided conversation. I think, ooh, these can be fun sometimes. Except the one-sided conversation is clearly with me. The person on the phone is referencing my, then recent, maternity leave, our company by name, a few other pretty identifying details that currently escape me. They'd stop speaking and it would be blank air, and then answer a pertinent question that I would have asked in that kind of conversation. Clearly speaking to me, but I never spoke to this company or this person. I did receive additional emails from them later on that were clearly initial attempts at communication and not a follow-up to a conversation. I checked with my coworkers in case somehow, somewhere, their conversation got picked up in my voicemail, and nope. Coworkers and husband were equally confused, but with zero explanation, we all just had to move on. Case file number 984, written by Tony Subliminal Fan. Their faces keep changing. I've had people who I've met before suddenly change appearances. Like, not just hair color or style, but eye color, the whole shapes of the faces, bone structures, body shapes, and voices. and over a very short time, so I don't think it is a complete plastic surgery makeover. People looked at me like I'm crazy when I insisted a coworker's girlfriend looked and sounded completely different than before. I just assumed he had brought his new girlfriend that happened to have the name of his previous one. Only her name is left intact. That's a completely new person, and yet no one has noticed her shift from a bigger bone frame, naturally curly blonde blue-eyed girl, to a thinner bone, straight-haired brown-eyed girl. Spooky. Either it's a glitch or they use witchcraft spells or YouTube subliminals or something. What about you? What do you think? Bonus file written by Scared Expression 444. The darkness was impersonating my mom. When I was a kid, my mom and I lived with my grandparents in their 3-story house. It had a basement, a ground floor, and a second floor. To give context, there was a living room directly in front of the stairs leading upstairs, so you could see my mom's room on the left, important for later, and my grandparents' room on the right. My room was further down the 2nd-story hall, but I spent a lot of time alone and with my uncle in the basement. For more context, the basement was a huge rectangle with one room directly to the left of the stairs, my uncle's room, and one room in the far back left corner, storage room, also important for later. With context out of the way, time for the actual story. This all happened when I was 8 or 9, can't remember exactly. It was around when Halo 3 came out. The first time it happened is honestly the worst. I was home, sick, from school. In reality, I just wanted to play Halo, bro. But everyone in the house worked, so I was alone and my uncle was at school. The only Xbox in the house was in the basement. So naturally, when everyone left, I got up and went to go play Halo. I'm down there for a few hours playing games happily, and all of a sudden, the storage room I mentioned earlier creaks open ever so slightly. Not completely, just enough to see a slit of darkness and plain as day. I hear my mom call me from what sounded like the furthest corner of the storage room, saying she needed help putting something away. My mom wasn't home at the time and I knew this. I didn't turn anything off. I bolted upstairs and laid on the couch until my uncle got home from school. He asked why I left the Xbox on and he thought I was sick and laughed at me. I just laughed back and said, "My bad, won't happen again." The only other time this happened was actually during a family dinner. We had cousins and pretty much our entire family over for a holiday. My cousins and I were playing with Nerf guns in the living room. They got hungry and went to get more food, so I sat by myself in the living room, reloading my magazines with darts, when something caught my eye upstairs. Same year as last encounter, I'm still 8 or 9 in this scenario. It was my mom's room door. It had opened, and because it was like 8 p.m., it was dark upstairs because no one was up there, so no lights were on. But my mom had walked out from the darkness and kind of waved me over to her with a weird smile on her face. I yelled to her, "Why?" And she just kept waving me over, but I clearly saw my mom, so I didn't question her again and started walking over. But as soon as I got to the start of the stairs, I looked to my right and saw my mom talking with my aunt at the dinner table. So I walked over and asked her if she'd been upstairs and she said no. Went back to the living room, looked up the stairs and her doors were closed again. Nothing like that has ever happened again, but it still gives me the chills when I think about it. Case file number 985, written by Late Ad 1111. The Ketchup Mindmeld. I was having lunch with my dad while my mom was out of town visiting family. We decided to have lunch at a local diner. My phone was on the table. It got silent and awkward, so I looked around for a topic of conversation. 5:09 p.m. I told him that I hate ketchup and that it sucks. He agreed and told me he only bought it because mom liked it. A few seconds later, I got a call from her. She, my mom, tells me that we need ketchup. I asked if she heard our conversation, but she said she didn't. She called purely to tell us we needed ketchup. Then we said our goodbyes and that was the entirety of the call. I asked her later why she called just to tell us that. She said she just randomly remembered and didn't want to forget to ask us to pick up some. Creepy file number 78, written by Jack Black. The Road of Nightmares. I'm still a little shaken up. I saw it again, this creature, whatever it can be called. A little bit more info. I got a Glock because reliability was a recurring topic for defense when I last mentioned this. I also got it blessed, including the ammo, by a priest because many others said religion would help. I also got a personalized grip with some scripture on it and put a cross on the slide in the magazine. I also kept a Bible and rosary just for my car. So my buddy and I were on our way home from a party at my mother's house at around 1:30 to 2 and went down the same direction I went before. Oh yeah, I wasn't alone this time either. Anyway, we were just driving and joking around like any other night, and once we got to a certain point, there was heavy fog, much like before, so obviously I slowed down a bit. We drove normally for a bit after that, with much less conversation because of the fog. Then the turns started again. My buddy, who we're gonna call DJ, mentioned the turns, and then I mentioned the story that he had laughed at me about and never believed. After that, he was very serious and we didn't joke around anymore. Now he was in it. We went up an incredibly steep hill that just kept going up. There were turns both sharp and wide, but we kept going upwards the entire time, at least 20 minutes. About 15 minutes into the climb, DJ started to pray. We are both religious. And I handed him the rosary I kept in the car, and he took out the Bible I keep in there too. After that, we stopped moving up and the road flattened out. After going straight for a little while, there was another very tight turn. I felt the air stand up all over my body and drew the Glock from where I kept it. DJ saw and drew his as well. As we round the corner, I slow down even more, barely crawling forward. The corner ends and that thing is there, in the road, crouched just the same as before. DJ says something, but I don't know what he said, and I stopped the car. We are farther back than I was the first time. This thing is just barely visible at the edge of the fog. I lean out my window and level my gun. DJ does the same, except he opened his door and rested his weapon on that. Also, not to forget to put a description in here. So it was about 7.5 feet tall, very tall, really pale skin, skinny as hell with long arms, no clothes visible. I wait for something to happen. I don't know what I was waiting for, but I didn't fire. We sit like that for maybe 2 or 3 minutes until DJ says, "The hell are we doing here, bro? Let's get the frick out of here." He shuts his door, but keeps his gun outside the car and leveled. I get back in and put the car in reverse. As soon as I do that, that thing stands up. It didn't do it the same way as before. It was instant. There wasn't anything in between crouched and standing, like a video skipping frames. I pressed the gas and slowly moved backwards, and it disappeared into the fog. DJ relaxes and pulls his gun inside and lets out a nervous chuckle. I back up more and turn the car around. When we get all the way around, the creature is in front of us again, closer than it was before, still facing away from us. Not gonna lie, we might have screamed like little girls, but it didn't move when we did. I put the car back in reverse and gunned it backwards till it disappeared back into the fog. This time DJ is screaming for me to get us the hell out of here. I say that I'm doing everything I can. After going backwards a bit, I bring the car to a stop, getting ready to turn around again. Before I can, DJ screams again and I look up. This thing is definitely facing us now and is coming at us full tilt. Its mouth was open but making no noise. Its arms were spread out like it was going to try to grab the hood of the car. I lean out and just randomly pull the trigger and it fires. I dumped the whole mag, not bothering to do much in the way of aiming, and I saw at least 2 holes open on its chest. It slams forward onto the pavement and crawls underneath the car. I look into the rear and see it running. DJ leans out and tries to fire, but he doesn't. I gun it forward and just speed off. We both notice that something is making sparks out of the back of the car, but I don't stop to check. We keep driving and end up going back down the incline we climbed before for about 5 minutes before we are suddenly back on the road we were originally driving before the fog rolled in, and the fog slowly dissipates over the next mile or so. Once the fog is gone, we drive for a little longer, then pull over and see that the thing knocked my muffler loose and it was dragging on the pavement. I attached some zip ties to keep it off the ground, then we left and went home, silent the whole time, gripping steel till we walked in the door. I don't know what to do now, but I figured you guys might. At least someone believes me now, I guess. Like before, I hear the bottle calling my name for now. I need some relief. Case file number 986, written by The Host 404. The elderly couple with superhuman powers. Once, my cousins and I were taking a trip on a bike path. I don't remember where, but we were riding our bikes to Corona, California. The bike path is a straight route with forests on one side and a river on another. About 30 minutes before making it to Corona, we saw an elderly couple walking slowly towards the same way we were biking. The elderly man was in a wheelchair with an orange flag attached to it, and the woman, which I'm assuming is his wife, was pushing him, and she had a large cloth grocery bag, so we sped past them. Upon arriving at our destination, we were shocked to see the same elderly couple walking towards the end of the bike path. How did they make it to the end so quickly? We don't know. There was no way someone could have picked them up in a car because cars can't go through the bike route. It's completely separate. We thought maybe it wasn't the same couple, but the orange flag, the woman's short, curly gray hair, and her large cloth grocery bag were identical. Case file number 987, written by Owl Carter, The Ghost Family. About 3 years ago, I worked at a pizzeria where I carried out varied tasks depending on urgency. This evening, I was in charge of deliveries. A couple and their 2 children, who were regular customers, ordered by phone and came to pick up their order at the restaurant. Usually they opted for delivery, but this wasn't the first time they had come to pick it up. As they left, I walked past them. A few minutes later, we realized that they were missing an item. We tried calling them, but there was no answer. As they were loyal customers and I had a delivery nearby their address, I decided to drop off the missing item myself. However, when I arrived at their building, something seemed off. They lived on the ground floor of a small building, and their yard was usually filled with children's toys, but that day it was empty. I rang the intercom, and through the glass door of the building, I saw an elderly woman opening the door of the flat and coming to me. She told me that she had lived there for years and there was no family living there. Confused, I went back to my car and video called my colleague to make sure I wasn't going crazy. She became puzzled as I had just been and confirmed that I was at the correct address. This would have been surprising otherwise, as I had delivered to them several times before and was very familiar with the neighborhood. I tried calling the customers again, but still no answer. Eventually, I had to move on as I was running out of time. About 2 weeks later, they reordered as if nothing had happened. I made the delivery and everything seemed back to normal. It was the same address. Of course, I told them about the strange events. They were just as confused as I was and had no explanation, since they, of course, didn't move, and no elderly woman lived with them. Moreover, they were certain that they had gone straight home after picking up their order. Since these events, we have referred to them as the Ghost Family. Bonus file, written by 16 the Tower, the Zebraman. It all started when I was about 5. My parents never had a lot of money. At least a few times a year, power was turned off due to failure to pay bills. Since it was such a frequent occurrence, we always kept a big box of candles and tea lights to light the house in the evenings when we didn't have power. My parents had put me to bed and blown out most of the candles, with the exception of the ones in the room. I woke up at some point early in the night to go use the bathroom, which was directly across the hall from my room in the trailer. I paused in the dark hallway and looked to my left, through the living room and into my parents' room, and I see him, the Zebraman. He was roughly my dad's height, 6'1", and honestly his appearance haunts my dreams still. He had the completely nude torso of a human male, but the head, lower arms and legs, and hands and feet of a zebra. His face though was slightly different, particularly his eyes. His eyes were orange and marquee shaped, and not set in the typical spot for an equine. Instead, they were centered at the front of his face. I was a child. I stared. I didn't know if he was real or not. Then he started sprinting, like a human, at me. I started screaming and bolted into the bathroom. I could hear his hooves clicking across our hardwood floor. They got close enough to the bathroom that I could feel the vibrations from his footsteps in the floor under my feet, and then they stopped. Seconds later, my parents were in the bathroom with me as I screamed and cried, terrified. My parents assumed I was sleepwalking. Then it happened again. A few months later, I saw the Zebraman again, and again I stared and he started running at me. Cue screaming and hiding, and my parents coming to comfort me again. As I got older, the Zebraman showed up every time we were lighting the house with candles. I learned quickly that as long as I had just glanced at him, he would be gone after I'd gone to the bathroom. The last time I saw him, I was 14. He chased me at that time, stopping just short of the bathroom door as he had many times before. After that, home felt a lot more peaceful at night, like something negative had finally disappeared from my life. Case notes for file 979. We both heard a blast that never happened. So this actually sounds very similar to exploding head syndrome, a well-documented medical condition. Now, of course, if two people experience it at the same time, it doesn't seem likely to be that because it's extremely rare to begin with, and then two people having it and also experiencing it at the same time, unless the syndrome isn't psychological and is actually triggered by some sort of physical effect in the world, maybe there's that. The other possibility is I'm reminded of that story where someone was thinking of a Rihanna song, and some other person that was just walking up to them had that imprinted into their mind and they said umbrella instead of the jumping rope that they were looking for. So maybe one of you had the original exploding head syndrome effect where they heard this sound, this explosion from the room, and because of proximity, it imprinted on your partner. I don't know who had the original sound, but then both of you heard it because you were near each other and basically spiritually Wi-Fi connected between both of your minds. The other possibility I can think of is ball lightning. There have been plenty of accounts where it simply fades away, but others where it interacts with other electronics and creates a spark or a burst of energy, and you describe a bright light. So those would be my guesses. Ball lightning, exploding head syndrome, connection. Case notes are file 980. Someone helped my doppelganger. So people do get confused at times and think someone looks very similar to someone else, but they're not. I mean, if you study witness accounts in courts, witness testimony is actually pretty low on the totem pole of evidence because our minds can reconstruct things. We can truly believe something to be true, remember it a certain way, and it's nothing like that at all. So there is something there. However, the fact that your name was also the same and you live in the general vicinity, that pushes us well into glitch territory because it's not just someone that thinks, oh yeah, you look very similar. No, it was your name too. The odds of that, so low. Not impossible, but extremely unlikely to just be mundane. There is also astral projection, which I'm always curious about. Is this a doppelganger or is it you constantly astrally projecting yourself and almost living another life in a different town? I wonder to what extent it can go, because we know astral projections can interact with the world to a sufficient degree to, if they're walking, they'll create steps, they'll be interacting directly with the ground floor enough to create auditory reverberations in the atmosphere to produce sound. So we know that astral projections they manifest to an extent that's more than a ghost. So to what extent, what is the limit on that? Could they live an entirely ordinary life, or a lot of people just projecting themselves around and going about their day? To what extent would they know that they're an astral projection? Because they can't eat or drink, presumably, right? If it's just their soul. Very interesting concept, though. Imagine one day you realize you just are a projection of someone else. It's definitely not me because I eat all the time, so I'm very real, I think. Case notes are file 981. My cousin paid us a visit, but it wasn't her. So I don't think we can discount common medical conditions, even just stress, where it can induce memory loss or acting like you're someone else, do a split personality disorder. But given this only happened once, as far as I can tell from the story, I'm probably going to discount that, and I may actually just refer to the past story where maybe it involves astral projection again. Maybe your cousin was in a distraught state for some reason, or even from a different universe. There's potential where maybe we can astrally project parallel universe over, one skip over. I don't know to how many layers of universes we could go to. I think there is a possibility that we could be transposed over without even realizing it. So maybe it was astral projection from your cousin from a different universe, and obviously a different life in that universe, so that's why she was acting differently. In that universe, maybe she doesn't have some ritual routine as she comes and goes, call ahead, get the coffee, hug you, So maybe that routine doesn't exist there, and that's why she was behaving differently. Different life entirely. I think it fits pretty well, because our soul is not tethered to one universe. That's very clear with quantum immortality. I wonder to what extent it goes. Case notes are file 982, the Interstellar gas station. I believe that cell phones will read SOS if they're unable to connect to a normal tower. Effectively, it just means that it's an emergency feature. It'll force the phone to connect to any network if there's an emergency 911 call going through, even if it's not on your plan. So that in of itself isn't really that odd, although, I mean, given the area, I'm assuming you've been there before, given you know the clerk, or the clerk that's supposed to be there, the 5 of them. So the fact that you should have cell signal there, but you don't, is odd, in of itself. And then compounded by the fact that both your debit and credit card from a different bank, issued from a different bank, didn't work. To me, this implies that you're not in the same universe, even though it's a parallel universe that is very similar. The SIM encryption on your cell phone, the SIM card encryption, as well as the encryption on your cards, would still differ between universes, even if they're almost identical. It's so hyper-specific that they would still be different. It would explain why the cards wouldn't work, and it would explain why your cell phone wasn't able to connect to any network. The only thing I can't explain is why the pump didn't work after you paid the cashier. Because if you're in a different universe, you're still interacting with the people there, and the pump should have worked. So, I mean, maybe that could just be a coincidence. Maybe in that universe, that clerk was lazy or incompetent and activated the wrong pump. So effectively, universal crossover, for some reason, combined with laziness, or a mistake. I could see it. Case notes for the bonus file. The man addicted to electricity. So I just want to say first off that having been homeless myself a decade ago, over a decade now, it's very wholesome that you gave your friend a place to stay. You know, obviously as a roommate situation, you're still paying rent, but it can be difficult to find a place that you trust someone to stay with. Now to the story, something just clicked in my brain as I was reading this. When you mentioned electrical cords and chargers, if spirits are fragments of souls, then presumably they still require some semblance of energy to reverberate, continue their existence within the realm, or maybe they require energy to phase into our dimensional pocket. Without it, maybe they can't do much. So in a sense, spirits would be drawn to that kind of energy, electricity, maybe other sources, heat, light. My guess though is, it's like a battery. They can be charged and it can last for a long time, so obviously there's plenty of accounts of spirits appearing where there's no obvious source of energy. So I think it's a charge that's needed, but not necessarily in the moment. It can be carried over with them. And it would also explain why, in cases where there's lights on or other electronics active, if a spirit is nearby, often the lights will flicker, electronics will stop to work, and it's simply a voltage drop because the spirit is literally drawing power from the circuit. That's a really interesting idea. It just kind of clicked in me. I don't know if it's true, but it kind of fits, doesn't it? Time for the daily story, or quote. I'll try to phase these in. During the gold rush, a man who had been mining in Colorado for several months quit his job, as he hadn't struck gold yet, and the work was becoming tiresome. He sold his equipment to another man who resumed mining where he had left off. The new miner was advised by his engineer that there was gold only 3 feet away from where the first miner stopped digging. The engineer was right, which means the first miner was a mere 3 feet away from striking gold before he quit. Now, the moral of the story, of course, is when things get hard, it can be so easy to quit, but you might just be a few feet away from gold. So no matter how hard things get, continue to persevere. It's worth it. Case notes are file 983, the voicemail from another universe. So I think the obvious answer people would give to this is that the man butt dialed you, but he was just rehearsing interacting with you because, he wanted to close the deal. So it would make sense that he would rehearse his pitch, basically. It's probably something I would do myself, being an introvert. I like to plan my social interactions. It's the plight of the introvert, but I like who I am. Now, it doesn't quite add up as simply as that, because he knew intimate details about you, like you having been on maternity leave and other details that shouldn't be possible to know. I mean, unless he stalked you on Facebook and LinkedIn and other sites like that. It's conceivable maybe he could find a lot of details, but not to that extent, I don't think. And then later on sending emails in a sense that, if it was a call attempt, why would he rehearse over the phone? And then it also means that he had your number saved in his phone to have accidentally butt dialed you? No, I think it's actually more likely it's just a jumbling of the information that's out there. It's energy. signals that we interact with through our phones, the calls. It's just specific organization of vibrations and waves that we're able to decode on our phone. Who's to say they can't travel between parallel universes? It explains a lot of weird stuff, if you grant that axiom. Case notes are file 984. Their faces kept changing. I've read a few comments saying this might be propopagnosia, which is a condition where people aren't able to accurately comprehend faces. They can't place faces. Everyone looks basically the same. One face is interchangeable with the next one. But then I don't think that fits, because if you weren't able to discern one face from another, one person from another, it wouldn't be that faces are changing, it's just that you wouldn't be able to recognize anyone by their facial features anyways. Also, you indicated their voice changes, their height, everything, so it's not just their face. This reminds me of a story where there was a person living across the street, husband and wife. I'm not sure, I think one of them was a cop. But anyways, one day came home and the wife was a different person entirely. Before she was tall and then she was slender after, shorter, not just a different hair color or anything like that. The only possible thing is witness protection, but that wouldn't really apply in the job. You wouldn't have to switch persons in the job, they would just quit and go live somewhere else in witness protection. So yeah, I'm not sure where this glitch would fall. It wouldn't be quantum immortality because it's happening so frequently to you. Not just one person, unless you're dying so often that you're switching universes like changing clothes. I suppose some people might perish often, and then wind up in different universes all the time. That would be unsettling, without really understanding what's going on. Case notes for the bonus file. The darkness was impersonating my mom. So here's the real rub of the story, the real question. Was this your mom astrally projecting a couple times, or was it an actual entity trying to lure you into darkness? Both times it was luring you into a spot where there was no visible light. I don't think it was your mom in that case. The story gives me the creeps, to be honest. I don't know what the entity wanted to do with you, but nothing good, I suspect. And this is coming from an eternal optimist, so yeah. It's odd though that the entity never tried to lure you anywhere again after that. I wonder why they stopped. Maybe there is an aspect of energy, like I mentioned the other day. Maybe they require a lot of energy to phase into this pocket dimension, and they can't sustain it forever. And maybe they don't want to be known or alert anyone, so they wouldn't try to draw it from the circuitry in the home or anything like that, give away their position, and then maybe have to suffer a cleansing. And now for the quote of the day. If you're going through hell, keep going. Winston Churchill. Case notes are file 985. The Ketchup Mindmeld. I do believe we have a link. I like to refer to it as a Wi-Fi, spiritual, metaphysical Wi-Fi connection between people that are important to us. I think it depends greatly on how often we specifically think about that person, or they think about us. It reinforces the synapses in our brains, and therefore reinforces the connection itself. Think of it as the strength of the Wi-Fi connection. I also don't think it necessarily means that both people have to be thinking about each other. I think it can be a one-way street. In this case, you were talking with your dad about ketchup, and it triggered an instinctual knowledge base in your mom, thinking, oh yeah, we're out of ketchup. Best alert them because they're out now and they can stop and get it. Fair enough. Also, I'm very confused. You don't like ketchup? What is this? Ketchup is great. It's sweet, but has acidity, so it's well balanced. It's a naturally balanced condiment. Like mustard is great too because it's low calorie, but it's not very balanced. It's very potent. You don't want too much. Just a bit. Ketchup though. Slather that on to no end. Case notes for creepy file number 78. The Road of Nightmares. Well, I certainly believe you encountered some form of creature out there. Something that's not well known. Is it supernatural? It could be. The question then is, this creature you interacted with, was it actually as seen, or was it able to induce this sight of terror in you? The fact that it was able to interact directly with your car, sufficiently to damage the muffler on the back, I'm gonna guess that it was definitely dangerous, but my instinct tells me that it was making itself appear more supernatural and deadly than it really was. It may not have appeared quite as threatening in its normal state, but that's just speculation. I don't know why my mind goes there. Hey, wait a second. I had forgotten Dave. Terribly bad of me, I know. What interests me next, though, is the fog. I wonder what effect that has on this whole scenario. Was the creature itself able to manifest the fog? Was that part of its power kit, I guess you could say? Something about the fog, well, I mean, obviously draws parallels to the mist, which was a great and terrifying movie and book also is based on. Is this emerging from the fog, from a different realm entirely? The way it's all described, I certainly hope it doesn't come back to haunt you again. It's interesting that you were able to damage it though. I don't know if it's biblical, but at least your weapon worked. And now for the quote of the day. Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. The slogan, "Press on," has solved and always will solve the problems of the human race. Calvin Coolidge. Honestly, one of the more underrated US presidents, in my opinion. More of a hands-off kind of guy. I like that. Case notes for file 986. The elderly couple with superhuman powers. So I wonder, from their perspective, did anything strange happen? Were they zapped forward in time? Or, in this case, in space? There's a few reports this past week where people are just zapped back in time or in space, especially in the stories I've read personally, but not on the channel. It's returning to that thing I mentioned, that sometimes there are just patterns that I notice. I don't know if they're relevant. Again, it could just be seeing a face in the clouds, But it's very interesting. It seems the most likely explanation is they interacted with a space-time portal that just zipped them to the end of the path. But why so specific? Why to the end of the path and not in the water, the ocean, to another country, to, anywhere? It's almost like they're placed there by a developer of the game. Very peculiar. Case notes for file 987. The Ghost Family. Well, I would have to agree with one commenter that I saw. It's all about the old lady. The family itself sounds very physical, corporeal. No issues there. Is it actually a ghost family? Maybe not. The old lady, though, maybe was a lost relative that died in that area, but it sounds like they were renters, so maybe not. Maybe it was just someone that had died in that area that didn't realize they were dead and answered the door as if to just greet a person that would come. Of course, to their perspective, no one else lives there. It sounds like a confused spirit. Not malicious, just confused. Also, just to say, I'm very impressed that you decided to go out of your way to try to bring these people, this family that forgot an item, their missing item. Not many people would do that. Again, I mentioned it before, but I think not enough people are taking pride in their work. It doesn't matter what you do. Do you clean offices or mop floors or flip burgers or deliver groceries or whatever it is you do? You should take pride in what you do. It's important. Not just for other people, but for yourself as well. It's a certain lack of hope, I think, that's especially prevalent over the past 3 years. Like a cloud of miasma that descended upon the world, and people haven't mentally recovered yet, it seems. I hope they do. We have to be more responsible and care for each other. Otherwise, what's the point? Case notes, the Zebraman. So I just want to say that I know that lifestyle, where you're poor growing up. I wasn't as poor as this, where there was no electricity and had to get light through candles, like living in the 1800s. But it wasn't, fancy dinners or anything like that. We moved constantly around. I don't know, I've moved probably 20 times before I was 18. It builds character. It makes you appreciate what's important. What more could you want from growing up? Love and character. And this really brings back vibes of Baphomet. Legends speak of it in many different forms. It's not just a biblical entity, but it's this idea, the concept of evil or trickery or inverting reality. The Zebraman is kind of describing that, in my opinion. Was it a demon? Was it an outward manifestation of your own inner turmoil? I couldn't really say for sure, but it's very creepy. The fact it wasn't able to enter the door that was closed, it was almost like a vampire story where it has to be invited in. There's a cosmic law, I guess you could say, regarding that. And then I also wonder, you say you felt inner peace, a peace of tranquility after this being left. Maybe it was because you found your inner peace that it left. And before that, it wasn't what was causing that turmoil, but you had to fight it off, face your demons, as it were, first. And this is Kinetic Symphony signing off. Like the video, subscribe, all that good stuff.